In the sprawling wilderness of a world made entirely of blocks, where the sun rose and set with mechanical precision, there lived a villager named Gideon, who had never spoken a word in his life. Not because he couldn't, but because he had nothing left to say. Gideon's village had once been a thriving settlement, nestled between rolling hills of emerald grass and a crystal-clear river that sparkled like diamonds in the morning light. The other villagers had bustled about their daily routines, trading emeralds for bread, tending to their crops, and sharing the comfortable hums and harms that pass for conversation in their simple world. But that was before the darkness came. It started with small things, crops withering overnight, despite perfect growing conditions, iron golems standing motionless, their usually vigilant eyes dim and lifeless. Then the other villagers began to change. One by one, they stopped their daily routines and simply stood in the village square, staring at something only they could see. Their eyes had turned an unsettling shade of purple, like the glow of an end portal. Gideon had watched in growing horror as his friends and neighbors became hollow shells of themselves. When the transformation was complete, they wandered off into the wilderness, never to return. Soon, Gideon found himself the sole inhabitant of a ghost town, surrounded by empty houses and silent streets. For weeks, he maintained his routine out of pure, stubborn habit. He tended the abandoned farms, repaired the weathered buildings, and kept the torches burning. But as the loneliness gnawed at him like hunger, Gideon made a decision that would change everything. He would find his people, no matter how far he had to travel or what dangers he might face. Armed with nothing but an iron sword, a handful of bread, and a determination forged in desperation, Gideon set out into the unknown. The world beyond his village was vast and unforgiving. He trudged through dense forests where the canopy blocked out the sun, creating an eternal twilight filled with the growls of zombies and the distinctive hiss of creepers. He learned to move carefully, to listen for the telltale sounds that meant danger, and to always keep moving when night fell. Days blended into weeks as Gideon followed a trail that seemed to exist only in his imagination. Sometimes he would find signs, trampled grass, broken branches, or the faint purple particles that seemed to drift on the wind like ethereal snow. The trail led him through biomes he had never seen before. Scorching deserts where the sand burned his feet, frozen tundras where his breath came out in visible puffs, and swamplands that bubbled with mysterious potions and hidden dangers. It was in a particularly dense jungle, where vines hung like curtains, and the air hummed with the buzz of insects, that Gideon encountered his first real clue. Hidden beneath a canopy so thick that barely any light penetrated, he discovered a structure that defied everything he knew about the natural world. It was a pyramid made of dark stone, covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. The entrance yawned open like a hungry mouth, and from within came a sound that made Gideon's blood run cold. The familiar hums and harms of his fellow villagers, but distorted, as if they were being played backward or underwater. Despite every instinct screaming at him to run, Gideon stepped into the darkness. The pyramid's interior was a labyrinth of narrow corridors, and chamber after chamber filled with an otherworldly purple light. Ancient spawners lined the walls, but instead of producing the usual mobs, they generated something far more sinister. Shadow versions of villagers that moved with jerky, unnatural motions. These dark doppelgangers paid Gideon no attention as he crept past, too focused on their mysterious purpose to notice the lone intruder. At the heart of the pyramid, Gideon found what he had been searching for, though not in the way he had hoped. His fellow villagers stood in perfect concentric circles around a massive beacon that pulsed with malevolent energy. But they weren't prisoners. They were willing participants in whatever dark ritual was taking place. Their eyes glowed with the same purple light as the beacon, and their faces wore expressions of blissful emptiness. In the center of it all floated an entity that Gideon had only heard about in the whispered legends of ancient times, an Enderman, but unlike any he had ever imagined. This creature was massive, its body crackling with void energy, and where its eyes should have been, there were swirling portals that seemed to look into the very fabric of reality itself. The corrupted Enderman was conducting the ritual, with graceful movements of its impossibly long arms, weaving the villagers' life force into the beacon's dark power. Gideon realized with growing horror that the beacon wasn't just any ordinary beacon. It was a conduit, designed to spread the corruption across the entire world. Soon, every village, every settlement, every living thing would be consumed by the same emptiness that had claimed his people. The entity had found the perfect servants in the villagers, whose simple minds were easily overwhelmed by promises of purpose and belonging. But Gideon had something the others didn't. His silence had always made him different, had always kept him slightly apart from the collective consciousness that made villagers so susceptible to the corruption. His years of solitude had strengthened his will, and his desperate journey had given him a clarity that the others lacked. Moving with careful precision, Gideon crept around the outer edge of the chamber. The corrupted Enderman was so focused on its ritual that it didn't notice the small figure making his way toward the beacon's base. Gideon's heart pounded as he reached into his inventory and pulled out the one item he had been saving for an emergency, a single block of TNT, crafted from the gunpowder of the creepers he had defeated during his long journey. The explosion, when it came, was magnificent and terrible. The beacon shattered into 1,000 pieces of crystalline light, sending shockwaves of pure energy throughout the pyramid. The corrupted Enderman let out a shriek that seemed to tear at the very air, its form beginning to dissolve as the ritual's power turned back on itself. The shadow villagers crumbled to dust, and the real villagers collapsed to the ground as the purple light faded from their eyes. In the aftermath, as the pyramid began to crumble around them, Gideon gathered his people and led them out into the jungle. They were weak and confused, but they were alive and free. The corruption that had been spreading across the world began to recede. Plants started to grow again, and the natural order slowly reasserted itself. Gideon never did regain his voice, but he no longer needed to speak. His actions had said everything that needed saying. He had saved not just his village, but potentially the entire world, through nothing more than determination, courage, and the kind of quiet heroism that rarely gets sung about in legends. As they made the long journey home, Gideon looked back once at the ruins of the pyramid, now nothing more than scattered stone blocks being reclaimed by the jungle. Sometimes, he reflected, the greatest victories come not from what we say, but from what we choose to do when no one is listening. The beacon's dark light was extinguished forever, but Gideon had become a beacon of his own, a reminder that even in a world of infinite blocks and endless possibilities, the most important thing you can build is hope.